All right. We're going to do a fairly quick meeting and get to questions at the end. Basically, I want to give a status update. We've been trying to do this fairly frequently as we're, getting things put together on the grid. I want to welcome everybody to it. You guys, the growth that's happened in the last couple of weeks has been phenomenal. And I've loved seeing all the creative efforts and things that people are doing, and also how people are collaborating together. Makes me excited to see this because really that's what, to me, I think coming into this, the strength of this group is the community that we've all carried from inwards over and now are recreating in here. So welcome. I'm glad that the grid is there. I'm just going to take a moment and recount the last couple of weeks, because the very first town hall we had was literally 3 weeks ago, and there was no grid at the time. So everything that we're going to talk about today has been accomplished over the last 3-week period. There's been a huge flurry of effort. I've got some stats that we put together. I'm going to actually get these in a format where we can report more regularly. So in other words, they'll be automated. We'll pull them from the database and produce a regular report on the website. But for now, these stats kind of are collected and represent where we currently stand. We have 67 users on the grid. The login stats are over the last 5 days, basically 257 logins, about 37 logins today as of about 2 hours ago. 49 yesterday, so people are logging in. I mean, it's a closed grid, so these aren't hypergrid users coming to visit. This is residents logging into their accounts. We have 95 regions. Of those, 32 are public regions, which consist mostly of the center area, the S as it's called, and the water around that. 17 waterway regions. Waterway regions are those regions that kind of are out from that center core. And you all help actually fund those through the connection fees that you pay. And then 46 private regions that are made up of a variety of 2x2s and single regions and so on. I think that's a pretty nice place to be after a 3-week period. Everything's up and running. I am still turning up infrastructure stuff, and I've got a long list of things like that I'm going to talk about in just a second. But the grid server's configured and running as expected. I have a large local disk that I'm using for backups. By the way, all of the drives in the system that we use, all the disk drives, are configured in what's called RAID. There's basically redundancy at the drive level. So everything that's written to disk has a hot spare backup that is, so if a single drive fails, nothing goes down. And the provider that I have will get notified of the drive failure and replace it, and the drive gets rebuilt so that there's active kind of sparing happening. We've got a fair amount of backup already in just the grid itself, but I also have a 4 terabyte disk space I'm going to use for regular daily backups, and eventually we'll move to offsite backups that'll happen less frequently, but be regularly produced, so that if anything ever happens to any of this infrastructure, we really should be able to rebuild it all from the region backups and grid server backups that are taken. So I feel good about all this stuff getting assembled, like I said, in this short period of time. I feel like the infrastructure is being built for the long haul, and that's important to me. I want everyone, I know all of us have experienced loss of our homes in virtual in the past. I really am trying to do this and build this in such a way that we can be around for a good long time. We've been operating Utopia Skye-Grid, which is the OpenSIM version, for a little over 3 years now, with really no serious outages of any kind. I'm hoping to try and provide the same level of reliability with the halcyon effort that we're doing here. I'm trying to build this so that that's ensured by the architecture, the infrastructure that's put in place. So I think I'll take just a moment and celebrate some of these accomplishments. I think it's really awesome to see where we're at. I look at the map and frankly, it blows me away that we're where we're at from where we started. I had to laugh it's just about a week ago. I brought a whole bunch of regions online. Most of the regions were turned up just about a week ago now. And Moonrise we were talking on Welcome, had a kind of an impromptu party, and she was saying that she was kind of logged in and watching the regions kind of poof into existence. That made me laugh and smile. So I think it's cool that we're at this point, and we're going to grow from here. So I'd like to celebrate that part, like I said, celebrate our success, and then let's move on to the things that still remain to be done. I had wanted, ideally, to be able to load ores by now. I have been working through the code. Well, there are a number of problems with the current ore loading code. So one of the things I wanted to underscore is, other than to take a backup and do a rollback, Inworlds never you were never able to load an ore in Inworlds. It's really something that's unique since that time. And it introduces a kind of a random element to the picture, because you're taking content from the outside and bringing it into the environment. So in my opinion, it's an area where extra care is required in terms of how you handle that data. And that's what I've been trying to do with the code. I can say that what's there now does not fully function, and I've been bug fixing for about a week now. There's a couple of other bugs I've addressed, by the way, while we're at it, and I'll come back to those in just a second. But my main focus has been this ore loading. I do have it to a point where I can load ore files like normal. The filtering is not functional. It would likely work for an ore file that was loaded from Halcyon, because I think the bulk of the testing that Jim probably did when he wrote that code was that scenario. But I've had a number of issues with loading ores from OpenSim. I've also talked before about the problem with materials not loading correctly. So I don't have fixes for the materials part, but I do have the bulk of the ore loading code working. The filtering part is still not working. I had hoped to have been able to really get to loading ores by this time, and I've had to take this kind of side trip to get the code up and stable. I still can't do filtering correctly the way I want to, which means that I'm going to have to work through each of the ores that we load on a case-by-case basis and work with you as residents to verify that the content that's in that ore is valid. There's nothing in there that would potentially compromise the integrity of the inventory, right? I don't really want to introduce potentially botted assets or things where there's not clear permissions to bring the content in. We've been trying to be careful of that from the beginning. So I'm going to need to work with you individually as I load these. So we are going to start loading ores. I'm doing a little bit more testing on the procedures I'll follow to do this today. And then I'll start working through our list probably tomorrow evening with each individual one at a time and try and get the data loaded. In the longer term, I'm going to fix this process so it works the way I think it needs to work, because I'd like to be able to offer to you the ability to take an ore as a backup of your region and know that the content's correct. And the same thing is in reverse, be able to take an ore in and know that we can successfully move data from another grid into the environment, and it's done safely without compromising any intellectual property. Similar kinds of work I did a little bit of work on the inventory archives as well, and I'm going to try and get that also working 100% for the same reasons. I'd like to be able to offer inventory backups and the ability to import inventory. Those two things are still development tasks that I will complete over the next couple of weeks. And like I said, we will start loading ores. Just touching a little bit on a couple of other things that I'm aware of. So now that we've been using this new environment and you've been logging in, There is a couple of issues that have been raised that I've investigated. So I'm going to go through that list real quick so you're aware of it. Firstly, the appearance code is dated. All of the code is dated, to be honest. There really hasn't, other than Jim's work on ore loading, there really hasn't been any significant development done to this code since 2018 when Inworld shut down. Obviously, that's changed because I'm actually doing development now. And appearance code is one area that in particular needs some attention. I've had some conversations with Beck, who works for the OpenSim side of Firestorm team. Basically, she's responsible for producing the OpenSim viewer, and tracked down a couple of issues that relate to bake-on mesh being introduced. So there is some missing code in the appearance handling that results in, and I'm sure everybody here has experienced this, you'll get a case where your avatar won't load in completely, or things won't attach, or you'll actually get errors on the console on your viewer that say that some asset can't be found. The assets are fine, by the way. When that happens, it actually is a false error message because there's a failure in the code. It's not handling a wearable type that was introduced with Bake-on Mesh. So I'm going to have to revisit the appearance code and get that updated. I know what needs to be done now. That's something that is going to get worked through. And soon I'd like to, because I know just being able to change outfits successfully is a pretty important thing. I've touched on the ore filtering. The other area that I've seen problems with imports through ores is that the mesh cost is incorrect. Everything has a cost of 1, which is a carryover actually from OpenSim. I would imagine actually that a Halcyon ore would probably be okay because the cost values are calculated and stored there. But if you load an ore from OpenSim, the costs are incorrect. So I'm going to have to go back in and look at when loading an ore touching meshes that I recalculate those values so the land impact is correctly calculated. There was a case noted by a kayaker where using his very cool tractor, tractor's not the right word, the terraforming tool that he's put together, bulldozer, yes. To do terraforming, you can pretty much swamp a client connection. It ends up getting kind of laggy, and the client, basically what's going on in that case is that because of a value that's set when you're doing lots of terraforming in a short period of time, especially programmatically, it generates too many updates to the client, and the client just literally can't keep up. So I've already changed that value in the code that I'm queuing for rollout soon and verified that fix. So that's something that will be coming. I know that the economy needs to be enabled. I'm going to get started with that. There's a couple of things I need to do with GlowBits to get that working. So there's some development work that still remains for GlowBits, and that's a priority. And then finally, the other issue that I've noted you may have seen is you'll sometimes get, when you log in, you'll sometimes get error messages that such and such a gesture or attachment can't be found in the asset database. And again, that error message isn't correct. It's not, the asset's not actually missing. It has to do with the way inventory is being fetched right now, and you get a false error message on returned. It's a timing issue. So I'm going to go in and see if I can't kind of surgically fix that as well. So those are all problems that there's also, there's other things I haven't mentioned that I also am aware of. The 26 item fix still needs to be handled. There's a number of other things. By the way, these are things that they all exist in Halcyon today. If you're on another grid or any other grid that's running Halcyon code, they likely have these problems. I'm going to fix them for Skye-Grid. So at least in our case, on our grid, we will hopefully, when everything is addressed, these things won't be an issue, and we'll have what I would expect to be reasonable performance and reasonable experience, what one would expect to be on a regular grid. These things are all going to get fixed. I'm aware of them. If you do see other issues or new things that crop up when you are using the grid, please enter a bug report in the ticket system, because in a lot of cases, you might give me data that I don't have that I need to track something down. Your scenario might actually be the key thing that tells me, oh, I see what's going on. I can go in and fix this now. That actually was what was the case with the appearance problem. At least, especially when we're getting started, too much information is not bad. So if you are able, if you do note a problem that doesn't work, something doesn't work the way you think it should, and you're willing and able to put a ticket in, I would very much appreciate it. I'll go through and triage those things. I might close your ticket if it's a duplicate. Don't be offended if I do that. The information is still important to get. And then I'm going to track and work through these changes as I have time. So that's kind of the state of the grid from a kind of work in progress perspective, because we're still fixing issues and addressing things. I think we've come a long way, but we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm here and signed up to do it. So I'm looking forward to helping build our world with all of you. The last thing I wanted to touch on today, and then we'll open things up for questions, is the billing support. So in order to get the grid up and running, we made an upfront investment in servers, and which includes like setup costs and the first month of rent on those servers. That includes licenses for Windows. Everything is licensed as it should be. I consider the first month startup costs, and ideally I would like to be in a position where some things like the ore loading were behind us by now, but I've already kind of explained the issues with those things and why they're taking a little bit more time than I'd like. But our plan is to start billing effective December 1st for the regions that you've all ordered. And I really want you to know that I appreciate the faith you put in us, and the orders for those regions say a lot, especially given the past history. So many people have been burned in virtual. I was talking to Callie this morning and saying that at some point, it seems like for grid owners that the ethics sort of went out the window, and actually operating your business and being legitimate business owners who treat their customers well and try and do the right thing by them just doesn't seem to be an issue for a lot of grids. That's not the case for us, and that's not the way I choose to operate a business. I've been doing this for a long time, the IT space, and I want to run this right. So we're not where I would like us to be, but I do know that we're going to get there. And in order for us to continue to grow and go forward, the billing we will be starting billing on December 1st. The way I've been doing that in the past, and I think it's worked pretty well, is to use PayPal. I will eventually add other payment methods like credit card payments and so on. But today, what I generally do is PayPal invoice that is produced every month. So basically on the due date, you'll get a PayPal invoice. You have 7 days to pay that, and it should list all of the regions that you own, plus the discounts that apply and so on. So, and any fees that are incurred on a recurring basis. So that's a monthly, every month generated bill. You should be able to directly pay from it. When you get the email message, there should be a link that lets you click through to get to the website, to get to PayPal and actually pay that, and then that's tracked our side with the invoice, so I know which invoices have been covered and paid for. As I said, in the future, we'll enable some other mechanisms. I haven't tried this yet, but the business account that I'm associating with this activity supposedly also supports recurring payments. So you should be able to go in and set up, just pay this every month when it's due. It'll automatically process that payment. That's not the default, but it's so you have the option of making that choice. But that should also work. As normal, if you have any issues or something doesn't work right or doesn't work as you expect when these builds get generated, please follow up with us and enter a ticket, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can to get it addressed. But like I said, I've been doing this approach with Utopia Skye for a while now, and I think the feedback I've gotten is that it works pretty well. So I'm going to ask my sweet Callie to see if there's anything I'm missing, because I think I've got everything covered, but I don't want to miss something.
Do you want to cover what we'll need from creators individually. So we've got a couple of different things in the residence announcement channel located in this category. So if you're looking at Discord and you're looking at the SG residence area, there are several channels underneath there, and one of them is the residence announcement channel. Anything that's related to the grid for residents, and those are people that have indicated that they will make an avatar on the grid, not necessarily that they're landowners, okay, will be posted there. Anything that is for a wider audience, in other words, people that may or may not make an avatar, people that are just curious about the grid, will be posted in Skye-Grid General. So in the residence area specifically, we're posting via the last announcement that went out called Grid-Wide Blanket Permission from Creators. We're posting a list of people that give grid-wide permission for their objects. For example, Teresa Matfield and Sovereign this morning as well. So if you talk to a creator and you acquire grid-wide permission, then you need to let me know and I will add it to this list, and I'll keep updating this list, and it's pinned. So if, if it's a week between today and the next time you check Discord, in that channel, the residence announcements channel, it's got the bullhorn in front of it. At the very top, if you click on the thumbtack, you'll be able to see pinned messages, and it's right there at the top. So that's where we're kind of keeping track. Now, I don't need to know if you have individual permission. Mike will need to know that, and that's kind of what I was getting at, Mike, was do you
Okay.
need, what do you need? Like, do you need a list or the UUID or, that kind of thing? So we can tell people as they start to go through and say, oh, I have this from so and so. What do I need to get? So, and be kind when you reach out to these creators. It is likely, for example, Teresa Matfield, I know, got a number of IMs from people looking for that permission. So much so that she was just like, "Look, just take it. You can do it. It's fine." And while I, joke, she's also not too well. Her health is not in a good spot. So we want to be kind of respectful of that, but we do need to acquire permission. So they can give it to you individually or grid wide, and we'll handle it accordingly.
Yeah. So the grid wide part, as you said, we've got addressed. There's the message that will track that, and I'll account for that when I load the ore. When I get to your ore, we'll have a conversation. So I'll be able to get you a list of, hey, here's the IDs that are in this ore that I can't account for. I'm not sure who they are. And if you're able to supply account information for those, that'll help with the loading process. A really important one, especially, is your ID. Because a lot of this content will be coming from another grid, obviously, since we're new. I'll need to be able to translate and map the content that you're the owner of in a alias of yourself on this other grid into the current one. So that one in particular is important. The other ones are, for content creators for whose content you've used. And I can help when we get to having that dialogue with a list of IDs that I don't have assignments for. But in general, if you know what's in the ore that you're bringing over, being proactive is helpful because you can just realize we're going to have this discussion, and if you know that, like Teresa Matfield's an example, if you knew that she'd used a bunch of her content in things you've created and you had to get permission, you could do that. In this case, you don't because we've already got it. But there's probably other creators that are similar. And if you know them in advance, starting to have those conversations, if you haven't already, would be a good thing. Because that way we can move things along as I start to load everything up. Okay.
Once we're done with any questions, I'd like to open up the floor for folks who feel needing to stay around. I would kind of go through a high level overview of the Discord channels because there's quite a few of them now relative to the grid, but I don't want to take the meeting time for that specifically. So I'm going to open that up to anybody that wants to stick around when we're done.
So let's go ahead and open up the floor to questions. If anybody has anything you'd like to ask or that we haven't addressed. I see Zauber has a hand up. Go ahead, Sauber.
The invite to speak, Sobrin, might appear at the top center of your screen. There you go.
Yeah, I had the meeting room chat in a different window to pop out.
Yeah.
Okay, with the ores that got exported from Inworlds and were filtered by Jim, do those need any special permissions to be brought in, since they already had permission for the stuff going out?
Yeah, generally speaking, I would assume no, that for the reasons that you mentioned. People were opting in. I know there were some things that showed up on EG that surprised people, but I don't know the source of that data, so it could have come from another grid and that way. So I'm going to assume that the ores that were generated from Inworlds directly were filtered correctly when they were made. And yeah, we won't need to follow up on a lot of that stuff. I also have a list of a lot of the IDs already for people that opted in there. So we should be able to match stuff up.
All right.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else?
I just want to specify, too, that this is really your time to ask us pretty much anything and everything that you need to ask in order to help your virtual life be the way that you would like it to be. I know that in previous iterations, that may not have been something that was done, or I can't really speak to how other grid operators work, but that's one of the things that we do, and we like to do it often. So, we really want you guys to feel like you have a voice. So please, don't hesitate to ask a question. Even if you think it's going to sound dumb, it probably won't.
Lex has a question. Lex, did you get the invite to speak? Oh, looks like he put his hand down. I don't know if that means you're... Oh, do you still need to speak? Do you have something you want to ask, Lex? Okay. I don't know if we can just...
Yeah, everybody, we want to make sure that we answer everybody's questions. So, with the exception of Lex, who there was a technical glitch for a minute there, please make sure that you raise your hand so we can answer your questions. So, I think I saw Lola typing at one point. Lola, go ahead and click the raise hand icon, and we'll get to your question next. Lex, I'm going to send you the invite to speak now.
Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Yay. It's hard to see that thing up there. Anyways, my region, I just have a single region, not a 4x4. And this is not a question. I just wanted to let people know I'm leaving my land level, whatever that is, 20 meters up or whatever. It's all going to be water. So feel free to boat through there, fly through there, whatever you want. Pretty much the only thing I'm going to have on my region is a build a platform up, 3,000 meters or whatever. And my lot, it borders the straits on two sides, so that'll add some extra water on that little corner. I think it's called Lex Particles, if on the map. That's
Cool.
all.
Has anybody tried vehicles, boating around or flying?
I have not yet, although I have flown over it with my avatar. And I have to say the crossings are really, really nice. Barely a blip. And I didn't lose any clothing.
That's good.
It
That's
might be a
always
good thing.
Okay, well, if you do have a question, please raise your hand while that's going on. There's one more thing I'd like to address. I've had a couple of exchanges this week where people are asking questions about whether the grid is open. Are we taking orders? And I do recognize that, and I should have said this earlier, that one of the problems is our website presence needs to be updated with more specific grid information, like the stats. And you need a place to go to look at the map and those kinds of things. And I am working on that as well. But we're definitely open. and we're definitely taking orders. Really, we just want to keep growing from here. So where we're at now, we can cover costs. And that's important because that gives us stability, right? We'll be able to cover the costs of all the servers that are purchased and things like that. We have some growth room on the current servers to add additional regions. I'd like to be able to build up a little bit of a cash reserve for the ability to add new if we see demand and that kind of thing happens. But if you definitely bring your friends, I mean, talk to people. If anybody has any questions about the grid and would like to just talk to understand what we're doing, please refer them. I mean, if sharing some information is helpful, but absolutely refer them to talk to Callie or myself, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that they have. We're especially trying to get content creators, but also regular residents because they spend money. And a lot of you are content creators. I realize that as well. So we want to keep growing from here and build a really wonderful, healthy environment. I think the time is right for it, and I'm excited about that. All right. One more call for questions. If there's nothing, I'll turn it over to Callie and she can talk through the Discord piece. Thank you so much, everybody, for your attention and for your interest. Like I said, just celebrate what we've got and keep going forward from here. I think this is cool stuff. I'm really excited about. I'll tell a little story. I've been doing development on OpenSim for years now. First with InWorlds, of course, and then for a little while with OpenSim, I started a group called OpenSim NGC for Next Generation Core, and that group maintains the code that we run on Utopia Sky. There are a couple of other grids also run that code, and I'm really pleased with the collaboration that happens in that group and information sharing. It's the way I ideally like things to be. I have the same experience now get my fingers back into the InWorlds code. So that's been exciting. I'd like to recognize and thank David, primarily David, because I think he was the driver for making this code available. There really hasn't been much work done on it since he left, but also since InWorlds shut down. And so there's some things that need to be updated, but I'm all about that. And we're going to get to a point where things are humming and back to the level of quality that people experienced in InWorlds as well. I wish the team that is public that supports that quote Halcyon code was as good to work with as NGC team is. I'm open to collaborating with people, but I'm keeping the code base private while we do development, because I think it's important to ensure that for the residents that are here, we have a quality environment. And the best way to do that is actually focus on supporting you and not on supporting a community that's a little toxic, to be frank. Definitely enjoying getting back into the code and working on Halcyon again. In this incarnation as Skye-Grid, I think you're going to see some great things, and I'm looking forward to delivering those and enjoying them all with you. All right, so I'll turn it over to Callie, and we'll wrap up.